Okay, so let's start with the lesson number 2, so strange an accident. And so let's do this. Let's come to the reasons why this was important to Mary Shelley, because what we see introduced, and I will be one of the first people to say that this is not my favorite part of the book. In fact, these letters are my least favorite part of the book. There's so much to get from them. There's a lot of really good stuff about them. But I'm kind of one of the people, I want to jump right into the story. And so this is really laying for us a lot of context. And so let's talk about really quickly, let's frame out the purpose. Why did Mary Shelley choose to use this character, this person, Walton, in letters to his sister? What was the intent here? Because she's something trying to do, again, with the narrative. Remember, we talked about last week that this is an embedded narrative. And so we start with Walton's letters, Walton's stories. And then it's relayed to us that within that story, he's going to learn the story of somebody else. But inside that story, it will be the story of a third person. And so Walton's letters serve a really good purpose for us, which is, the first one is to frame the narrative. What do I mean by that? Do you think? Does anyone want to guess?
Set up the story.
Yeah, to set up the story. So can I borrow your thing real quick? Just want to borrow it real quick because I want to show it off because I think it's just really good. But you notice how she's framed the picture in there? Now she could have painted the whole book, yeah? But we notice how there's very distinct margins around it. And so what does that do to our eyes visually? It pulls us into the picture, right? So to frame something, to frame a narrative, means that it is specifically trying to pull our focus in a very particular direction. And what this does, and it's really a unique way to do it, is by using a person that's really outside of the main story, that person, that fictional character, can help be the one who narrates or directs us to what is important. If you just start out with a story without any framing of the narrative, oftentimes what you'll find is you're trying to be the one who has to kind of make your way through it. But no, since we have Walton here for us in his letters to his sister, he really clearly tells us what is important and what isn't important. And we want to make note of that. In fact, he's going to leave us a ton of clues about what is going to be significant to this book. And so if you were paying attention in those first 4 letters there, you will see, as we go along, some themes, right? He's foreshadowing. And so that's basically alluding to something that's going to happen next. I would encourage you, if there's good movies, and again, keeping in mind that you're probably having this conversation with your parents, good movie makers, what they'll do at the start is they'll leave this foreshadowing of things that are about to come. And after you watch it the second or third time, you'll go, I never saw that before. They basically gave the whole story. Right there in the very front, they gave a lot of clues on what the actual ending was going to be. If we pay attention to the clues, it's easier to navigate. The next is to give a veneer of realism. And so a veneer is basically there's real wood and then there's fake wood. There's particle board. So a veneer is like putting fake wood grain over something. It's not the real substance. It's something that's kind of a false way to do things. And so this veneer of realism with the letters, what it does is it takes the kind of the fantasy part of the story, the mythology of it, and she's trying to write it in a way that makes it feel like this could be a real thing, a real story that really happened. Because we have separation from the primary characters here, and we're hearing it through a third person. Again, with that framing of the narrative, what it invites us into is this becomes more believable. We think of this in terms of whenever we study somebody's letters, if you think of this was a real letter, that would make you feel like there's some truth to it, right? If we went somewhere right now and you found a box of letters, you would probably assume that those were real letters. We wouldn't know if they were fake or false, but our assumption would be, these are letters written from one person to another. Now, to Hannah's point earlier, it'd be really good if we had the letters back and we saw how the relationship worked and how they corresponded. There's a reason why we don't experience that here. And again, it invites us into the time, right? We think in terms of, you send a letter through the mail, you get it right back. What would have happened back then? If he's heading towards the North Pole, through Archangel to the North Pole, what's going to happen is he's not going to have an opportunity to send it back for very long amounts of time. And were letters always guaranteed to be received back then? No, it wasn't a guarantee at all. This is why correspondence, as we see even 4 letters here, was written again and again and again. Letters were sent regularly because chances are, you might get a third, maybe on half. Maybe you receive half of the letters that were written. And so, again, no phones, no easy access to it. And even as he alluded to, you may see me really, if things go bad, right? You may see me really quickly or never again. Those were kind of the 2 options. Like, if things go bad, I'm going to be back. And he even wrote in there, like, I might even show up before you even get this letter. I might be here in person. And so again, what that does to the person who's reading it is it gives a sense of realism. Like, these are real letters that are being sent out. And again, like, we read it in the book, right? And I know it's a fictional or whatever, but there's a veneer here, right? The author is trying to make it feel like it could be a little bit more believable. And the last one, and really the most simple of all, is just an intro to who Walton is. We may not see it now, but Walton will play for us a very, very critical role. And it's alluded to in the very first part of the book here, because the stranger that they bring on board, right? As he's developing a little bit of concern for Walton and Walton's pursuit of glory and pursuit of knowledge, this person, this stranger, is kind of lamenting, like, I hope he doesn't go the same route that I have gone. I hope this pursuit of knowledge doesn't end up the same way that it has for me, right? And as we find the stranger, we find him in full health, very vigorous, alive, like his life has been great. No, we find him emaciated, and not just physically because he hasn't probably eaten and there's strength, but there's a notice of, like, there's this weight of life and the stress of life that has been upon him. And so we see that the stranger and Walton are going to be, again, juxtaposed one to another. Walton's it's like, you ever see the before and after pictures? That's what it's meant to be. Walton is the idealized man here, who's got his life out before him. And the stranger introduces us to somebody who was like Walton at one point. But the course of life, something shifted for them. And so they've ended up in a much more difficult way. But Walton here is going to be a very big key for us to enter into the letter. Now, any questions on that or thoughts on that? Because I don't want to skip over it. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I asked you this question, though, and I want you guys to consider it. And you can feel free to give me answers. But what is it that you need in life? What is it that you need? Relationship? Okay. Other thoughts? Okay. Family. Okay. Growth? Okay.
I mean, it kind of opens up a lot of things.
Sure.
What is need?
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to think of what you need, then you have to figure out need to live or need to improve, need to live a fruitful life. There's different kinds of needs depending on what your goal in life is.
Yes, perfect segue. This has been thought about before in mankind. In fact, there was a man named Abraham Maslow, and he was kind of along psychological circles, and he developed what we call now Maslow's hierarchy pyramid, hierarchy of needs. And this is what he postulated. He said, yes, man is made up of many needs. We have different needs, and they go into different realms and different spectrums. But he believed that there was a foundational needs that would build up to ultimately the highest need of man. And so let's start here first. Physiological needs. The very base of everything is man's physiological needs. Now, these are obvious ones, right? If I said, what do you need to live? Air, food, water, right? Like, let's just start there. If there's no oxygen,
You're done.
we're gone, right? So very practical sense, yeah, we need air to breathe. Does man need to feed themselves to live? Yeah, right? Again, no food, your life could sustain for a time, but we're not, the quality of life is pretty diminished, right? Think of it this way, like, we've all like come across people who have less than us, right? And the quality of life may be improved because they may be happier, but there's some certain difficulties too, right? With people who don't have things. Nicole, my wife, has been on 3 different trips to South Africa with the church that we used to be a part of to do mission work. But we joined with another church that was there, and one of the first people that came and talked tried to address this very question. And he said, you know what? So many people go to places with the mindset of, we're going to tell people about Jesus, but they don't think about the practical needs of people. And his kind of main theme in teaching his sermon was, it doesn't matter what you know if their bellies are empty. And so the most practical thing we can do is feed them. You really want to show the love of Christ to somebody? Feed them. And then feel free to share the good news. Right? And so our basic, fundamental kind of air, food, water, shelter, sleep, clothing, right? Those needs are baked into all of us, right? Everyone needs those things. You don't have shelter and you're just to the elements, your life will be diminished. You don't drink regularly, have water, your life is diminished, right? And so after that, then he talked about safety. So once you have your physiological needs made up, then your safety needs. So this is personal security, your employment, resources, health, property, and see, so these are still some more practical things, right? But they go beyond just the, I need to eat and clothe myself, but now, how do I do that? And so how do I provide shelter? And so what does a home offer you? Have we ever thought about that, right? Like, you know, your parents own a home or live in a house, right? And it provides you very specific things, right? And some of those things, again, we assume, right? We don't always think about like how blessed we are to have an actual bed to sleep in. That's not the experience of a good part of the world, right? That we have, you know, cars to drive in. Did you know that statistically speaking, if you had a car, it didn't need to have tires, it didn't need to have an engine, it's just a shell of a car, you are richer than 98% of the world. I want you to think about that for a minute. 98% of the world. You have a running car, you are rich. See, so it's all about perspective, right?
Is it really 98%?
Yeah, 98%.
That's really high.
Yeah. Because there are so many indigenous groups or peoples that don't own. They might use things, they might have like bikes or whatever, but they don't own. I mean, even people who are somewhat wealthy they don't buy themselves vehicles, right? Living in big cities, they may not own a vehicle too. And so there's a lot of reasons to it. But the whole perspective that I'm trying to get you at to see is that so much of these basic things we take for granted. You guys talked about some of the things that are a little bit higher up on the hierarchy. Right? When you're starving, you're not thinking about buying a house. But when these basic needs are met, you can begin then to think in terms of safety needs. Now, the next one that he postulates is love and belonging. So once we have our physiological and our safety needs met, this is really then where we're getting to some of the deeper things that we can really talk about experiential needs. Because again, the foundation is like, it's hard to have context for a real loving relationship when you're starving. You have no food, you're no water, no shelter. Like, you can have relationships, but what are the chances that you will feel loved, really truly loved, if you are lacking certain things? That creates difficulties. I'm not saying that it can't happen, and that's not what he was saying either, but he is saying, again, kind of building one thing upon the other. This is friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. These are all really, really important things. And we spend a lot of time talking about here. Because, again, what we assume is all of these things for you guys are taken care of. Right? Parents feed you, provide for you. No one's starving. No one's ostracized, outcast. No one here is going it alone. And so this is really kind of where the bulk of our experiences, your experiences, happen. All right, the next one is once I have a sense of being loved and belonging to what? To a community of people, then he talks about this. Esteem. Esteem. This is where we feel respected, where we develop self-esteem, where we feel good about who we are as people, where we feel like we have maybe some status or recognition, where we have some strength and some freedom, we have some liberties, right? Because we are loved and we are accepted and we belong, we then begin to, in our own person, kind of walk in a certain way. There's a difference between a person who is loved and a person who is unloved. Now, this difference can be in our own mind, because people can grow up in loving places and assume, like, you never gave me anything. And so the human person's mind is really important to that. But there are foundational differences. And you can see this studies after study. We talked about this when we talked about Dickens a little bit. There's a whole theory called attachment theory. From 0 to 2 years old, you develop what is your attachment to other people. Is the world safe for me? Do people love me? And if you had a rough first 2 years of your life, like you're around a lot of shouting or yelling, or you've went through trauma, those people have harder times in their relationships throughout life. They just do. And it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you can't find redemption, you can't work through things. But my story and my life growing up with my difficulties creates in me, even now at 48 years old, relationally, I would say it this way, relationally I walk with a limp. So weird things and quirks that I do, I'm not always aware of. I have to be very mindful not to push people away. Why? Because I didn't develop really healthy attachments when I was younger. Now, I'm not slamming my parents. They did the very best that they could have. But there were some issues that were there. And so my self-esteem, because if I wasn't cultivated in love and belonging, would be hindered. Now, when I came to the Lord, began to function around a community, and then when things shifted even more, and over the last few years being a part of this community, what has it brought to me? A lot more understanding of what it means to be loved and to belong to something, which is doing what? Will increase my esteem. Esteem is really, we can think of it in terms of like the footing on which we can live our life. It feels solid. You ever have feelings in your life like it was shifting sand, like just nothing, you could never feel like you really were settled, right? But then do you remember feeling a little bit more settled? That's what esteem does. And again, these aren't biblical terms. I'll hope to wrap some of this into more of an idealized biblical understanding. This is a secular person trying to come to secular understandings. The last thing that he talks about after esteem is self-actualization. And let's not be scared off by the term self there. But this is ultimately the desire to become the most that one can be. Where now because you have all of these other things, you feel like you can make a difference. The way that I would say that to those who call themselves sons of God is where you begin to walk out what it means to be a son. Because you have a deep sense of belonging and love. It motivates you to feel really good about yourself, to feel like you're really on solid ground. It's not ground you've created for yourself, but it's the solid ground, right? The solid rock. We're building up on something that is foundational. The structure has been set. And now I can begin to walk those things out because I've become fully equipped. Now this would be the ideal, right? And we can all have difficulties at times, right? Anyone who's been with a toddler or somebody up to 10 years old and you've been out in town all day long and you haven't stopped at Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever junk you get, right? They'll say things like, "I'm starving." They're not really starving, but what they're indicating is, I have a physiological need. There's something that is unsettled. What will happen if that continues as a pattern? It begins to create cracks. Let's watch this psychologically real quick. I'm hungry. How many of you have heard the term hangry? Right? I'm hungry, but now I'm angry because I'm hungry. And I'm angry because I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel secure anymore. And if that goes on for long enough, it affects other people, right? Maybe you lash out at somebody. Well, that goes to love and belonging. That shreds down that foundation a little bit. And then you feel bad about it because you're like, well, I'm not really angry with them. I just haven't eaten all day. Well, that destroys our esteem. So something as small as not eating, physiological, can have radical effects on how we operate, right? This is where Ben has talked to you guys about things like health, what we eat, how we sleep. All of these things we assume that are really important for us are foundational. And so I want to bring this up because sometimes when we don't feel like people are loving us the way we want to love, or we're not feeling connected, sometimes the best answer to that is a good night's sleep, a good meal, a little bit of time and space, and a reminder that God has everything in control. Now, is this the experience of most people? No, most people have never thought this through. What do I need out of life? This is one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to ask this question. What do I really need? When we say things like family, I want to challenge us. Is that just the answer we feel like we're supposed to give? Or is that a genuine feeling that we experience? Because I think sometimes if we're honest, it's like, I get that this is really needed for me. I need my parents. But I think if we're honest, there's sometimes we're like, I could do without my mom and dad right now. They're telling me no, too much. I don't like that. Well, we got to work through that, right? We can't be just motivated by whatever emotions. And so a healthy person is somebody who has built up their foundations, their structures, their understanding. But we're gonna focus a lot here on this idea of need. This theme throughout the book Frankenstein is going to be about love and belonging. What does that look like? When I ask you this question, when it pertains to your spiritual life, your walk with God, how do you perceive His love towards you? Do you have a sense of belonging in God's house as a son with other sons together? Do we have a sense of what it means to be in community? Or do you struggle with this? And again, listen, there's no right or wrong answers. There are only answers. Answers provide us information to maybe explore where we desire to be. The very heart of this story is going to be one that it's going to invite us into this question of how do we relate to God, the one who's created it? How do we relate to the things that we create? What is the context of the relationships that we've been given? And what does that look like? And Walton here is introduced to us in the story to begin to flesh this out a little bit, right? Walton sets out his journey to the North Pole, but what happens to him in his letters as he's setting out to go there? What is the first thing that he really feels? And he he alludes this to his sister. What is he feeling? Loneliness. So to Caden's point, right? A man who is searching for glory. He's got all of these lofty ideas about what life will be like when I get to the magnets, right? True north. The land of eternal light, right? We get all of this imagery about like this idealized, perfect place. Like in his imagination, their imagination at that time, right? The North Pole wasn't just a frigid nothing. It was like something wonderful was going on because they understood compasses and magnets, and there's a pole there. And maybe there's like new ways to explore and easier ways to get across the world. And it's just going to be nothing but light all the time. And it'll be fantastic and wonderful. And I'll be able to contribute something to humankind. And he sets out, and he doesn't have a peer, really. He has people that are working for him. And he recounts some of their stories. Like there's this really nice guy, and he was supposed to get married to this girl. But she was in love with somebody else. But they couldn't be together. And so he's kind of, again, pulling us into this veneer of realism, something that has nothing to do with the main theme of the book. He's inviting us into, and it feels a little bit more real, because why are we having this story about this random guy? Well, that pulls us in. But what it does is it's a breadcrumb here of like, look at how that turned out. They got what they wanted. And this guy was a participant, a part of it. He got to encourage that. But he feels this deep sense of loneliness. The very first thing that Adam experiences after creation is this very thing, is it not? Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now let's pause right here, because this is going to be really critical. It's not good for Adam to be what? Let me ask you this. Was Adam alone? No. Who did Adam have?
God.
God is defined as love. Adam had love and belonging. See, one of the errors that Adam makes is to perceive, as he's looking at the animals, right? And he's naming them, and he sees that, they all have their likes and kinds. And he doesn't have somebody who is. But God designed him for relationship here. It's missed. The created misses the importance of its connection to the Creator. Now, Adam did not need Eve to be whole. Didn't need her to be. And that's not minimizing the role of Eve. Eve plays, obviously, a really critical part in human history, right? But properly understood, I believe, quite honestly, that Eve would have come along regardless. If Adam had right relationship with God, and then he would have been able to say, hey, look, there's everything else like this, and I love what we've got. But Father, wouldn't it be good for me to also have somebody? Like that would bless me. I think God was desirous to bless Adam. He did that through the life of Eve. But there is a longing, even biblically at the start, for there to be connection, relationship. May I ask you, have you ever felt alone? Can we relate to Walton? And he says it this way, like, even if I get to the very end of all of these things and I get this thing that I want, I'm not going to have anyone to share in this with. This is why the letter to his sister is really important. Because his letter to his sister is like, this is the closest relationship he has. But obviously his relationship to his sister is not fulfilling him. It's not the thing that has filled him with. And so short of a true companion for him, and again, this is not a criticism of her, because this could be all about Walton. His sister could be the most perfect person in the world. But he's longing for something, someone to relate to him in a way that builds him up. And this is why these letters, if we understand it from that perspective, can be very, very tragic. Here's a man venturing his whole life and risking his whole life. And his whole life could end with this understanding. He could come to a place of death, never feeling the companionship or the camaraderie of another. We're going to take a look at a few excerpts here. I think page 19, at least it's page 19. It's the very first part of letter 2 here is going to begin to flesh this out for us a little bit. He says this, "But I have one want, which I have never yet been able to satisfy. In the absence of the object of which I now feel as a most severe evil, I have no friend." Margaret. "When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper, it is true, but that is a poor medium for the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine." I want you to think of that illusion. You guys are a little young, but have you ever had like a friend who or a parent, like something happened and you just looked them in the eyes and you knew it was okay? You knew that they knew what you were feeling, what you were experiencing. Like you didn't have to say a word. They just got it. There's a depth here that he's longing for. There's something more than, yes, he's vainglorious. He wants to do all of these things. But what he's leaking in here is that in his heart of hearts, it's not about the accomplishment that he can make getting to the place. He wants somebody to share in it with him. See, he's teaching us this lesson, if we're listening, that life is not about the destinations we get to, but the people we share the experiences with. Walton alludes to both. It could be great things, could be disappointments. I just want somebody to be with me in it. "You may deem me romantic, my dear sister," and he's kind of making, crowding out the voices from outside, like he's foolish. Like, you're so romantic. Like, that's so silly. No, you may see that in me, romantic. Like this idealized sense of what life should be like. You might think that I'm crazy, like, to want this. But I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? And he's even putting a little bit more flesh on this, right? He's saying, like, if I had somebody else here, they might even be able to talk me out of the really dumb things I might do. It is not good for a man to be alone. This is the observation of God, right? He makes this observation when what happens? When Adam takes his eyes off of the father-son relationship and begins looking at creation. This is when God brings Eve as a comforter to him. Because God loves Adam, he gives him somebody who is like him. But it's because Adam has taken his eyes off of that which is truly, truly central. And the way this should look for all of us. One day you guys will all be married. And hopefully what you never do is you never put your spouse in a position above your Creator. That will be to your great ruin. I love Nicole more than anyone else in this world. But my relationship with Nicole will never be a replacement for my relationship with God. In the context of your lives right now, whoever is your best friend is not a replacement for your relationship with God. Your love for your parents, as fantastic as they are, is not a replacement for your relationship with God. And we're going to explore these themes as we continue to go through the book here. Let's move on to page 25. We're going to kind of bullet point some, a few little excerpts here. This will be now in letter 4. And we see things, this again, so strange an accident, right? Something he was not expecting, right? Again, he's on a boat and we're headed to the North Pole. The North Pole is not populated by a bunch of people. And so he's looking around and saying, I've got no one to spend it with. And then something happens. We perceived a low carriage fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs pass on towards the north. At a distance of a half mile, a being, which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. Now again, if we just read very quickly through it, we'll miss this. He is longing for human connection, and what happens across the horizon? The unexpected is that there's another human out there, and he notices really quickly, but this is not some normal human. And so what is this doing within Walton's heart? Well, likely what's happening is there's excitement and fear and a trembling and a wonder and kind of what is going on? Because I didn't think we'd even come across anyone else, but now there's somebody out there. And so who is that and what's going on and what's, right? Imagine, if you ever went on a road trip and you see something kind of different, you ever had that conversation what do you think that was? Well, I think it was this, I think it was that. So it's stirring up now some conversation, right, that's going on the boat. We're going to flip to page 28 here. We're getting into one of the other letters, August 13th, 1700 and something. We see now that what has happened. Not only did they see that initial sledge, but then they drew somebody else on the boat. So he got his hopes up, and then his hopes were realized. There's a man that's there. I began to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. Okay, let's get back to love and belonging here. He's feeling relationally validated, and so what is he seeking? Well, ultimately, he will help to try to sympathize and offer compassion. What this man is doing unknowingly is drawing out of Walton emotion, affection, camaraderie. I begin to love him as a brother. And now notice, this doesn't happen because there has been a lot of conversation between the two of them. There's something about this man that he is drawn to. And this, again, sets the stage for the message that Mary Shelley is trying to pound into our hearts is for this idea of longing to be satisfied, of loneliness to be quenched, of connection, camaraderie, of fellowship, companionship, love, belonging to blossom and to bloom, even in the deadest place on earth. See, he thinks he's going to find the magnets. What he has found is a brother from his own heart. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites at once my admiration and my pity. Now, what did he say he wanted for somebody? To experience both the high points and the low points of life. Now, he's reflecting this in the life of this man. He has my admiration. He has my pity, the good and the bad. I'm experiencing both with him. To an astonishing degree, how can I see so noble a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle, yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are culled with the choicest art, yet the flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence, right? We see that Walton finds a friend. companion, someone whom he could love. And it doesn't make sense to the logical mind, because it is as if they were fated to be there, that their paths crossed. There was some higher purpose that brought them to that point a little further down. I was easily led by sympathy, which he evinced, to use the language of my heart, to give utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say with all the fervor that warmed me how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune, my existence, my every hope, to the furtherance of my enterprise. One man's life or death were but a small price to pay for the acquirement of knowledge, which I sought for the dominion I should acquire and transmit over the elemental foes of our race. And so now it shifts back to, I've got this friend, and I feel like I can conquer the world and gain all of this knowledge and gain all of these things. I'm finally going to have it. Everything I wanted, and I'll have somebody to share it with. And I paused at length. He spoke in broken accents. Now this is the stranger laying, right, on his deathbed. He's sick. We don't know what's going to happen with him. But it's not looking good. The stranger says this, unhappy man. He just shared all of this exultant, like his life is going to be great. I'm going to realize all of these things. And the man who is laying in that bed looks at him and says, unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drunk also of the intoxicating draught? Hear me. Let me reveal my tale, and you will dash the cup from your lips. This is the man saying, you think you have something so wonderful, and you don't see that you're sick and dying and already dead. And so let me share with you the tale that I have to tell you about my life. So who is this man? Yeah, who is he? Frankenstein. We will find that this man's name is Victor Frankenstein. And he alludes to this other person, right? This gigantic feature being a what? Demon. It's a daemon. D-A-E-M-O-N. Demon. Right? He's going to say, he's going to give us the story of who that person is that I'm going to the ends of the earth to try to find. And he's going to recount his story with the purpose, with the distinct purpose of trying to get Walton to stop from pursuing knowledge. Now, really quickly, and we'll close, and we can't really miss this because it's really significant. Walton wanted or needed relationship. And once he felt like he had it, he wanted to get glory. And so in some ways, is Walton's affection for Victor here, is it really a healthy relationship, or is it a little bit manipulative? Yeah.
I don't think he has an affection for Victor himself. I think he has an affection for what Victor represents.
Yeah. What Victor can provide for him, what Victor represents is this lofty ideal. He speaks with eloquence, right? We see that Walton has idealized a life around attainment of knowledge and understanding. And we will see, in fact, we'll see this week, you're going to read chapters 1 through 4, the danger in the pursuit of knowledge. And why that as a means to itself. And again, I want you to look at our basic needs. What is not up there? Knowledge. You don't need knowledge to survive. You don't. It's helpful. Right? To learn things is certainly helpful. Your life will be hindered if you can't grasp certain concepts. But you can not know anything about math, but if you have a friend who knows about math, right, that relationship becomes all the more important, right? The relationship is much more critical. Studies have proven the biblical truth that it is not good for man to be alone. One of the ways that they break people whenever they would capture somebody, like an enemy from the other side, you want to know the primary way to break a person's spirit? They do this in jail too, to kind of discipline people. They put them in solitary confinement. You want to break a person's soul? Make them lonely. Distance themselves. Now, and I think they'll still give these people a little bit of food and water, enough to kind of linger on. But the most significant part, I think, is the middle part of this pyramid. It's right at the center, which I don't think he intended, but I think it speaks volumes to the reality of what love and belonging is so critical to us. Our need to fit in. Now, if I can just highlight an encouragement, both an encouragement and a warning. The encouragement is hopefully you have found a place to fit in here in our community. And if you haven't yet, the encouragement is find out how you fit in. The Bible tells us that ultimately the Lord is the one who is fitting us together. So maybe we're not fitting in because we've tried to force our way in. And maybe it's not about forcing our way in and trying to be what we think we need to be, but maybe it's allowing the Lord to shape us. And the warning is the same thing. Don't force your way. Don't force yourself. See, sometimes the mistakes that we make is we try to kick in the door. We try to prove ourselves. This is not about proving yourself to be someone. Now think of it in terms of sonship. Caden's my son, so I'll speak about Caden for a minute. Is Caden my son because he had to make a choice and a decision and he had to do all of these things? Why is he my son, Emma?
Because you married Nicole and had him.
Caden did nothing. He had no need to do anything to be my son. Not one thing. He didn't earn it. He didn't have to force his way in. Now, as he matures and grows, right, the relationship matures and grows and is shaped. But one thing Caden will never have to do, is earn my love or earn my affection towards him. Now, from my perspective, does that mean that Caden can do whatever he wants? Well, no, I hope that's not the lesson he gets from that. I hope the lesson that he has of a dad who loves him is that I want him to do what is good and what is right and what is true. I want him to live up to his potential. And I will be grieved when he doesn't. And I will be extremely blessed when he does. And when he doesn't, I will bring counsel and instruction for as long as I have the ability to do that. But Caden will have to figure out his way in this world. See, Caden can't live his life based on merely my affections, because I can love Caden all day, every day. And what must Caden choose? To receive. See, some of us, the problem that Walton lays out for us a little bit is that love is not, and belonging is not merely just about wanting or needing something, but it is a reciprocal relationship. Right? The love that I give to Caden is in hopes that he will receive it and take it in, and he will do what? Reflect it back to me. The Bible says it this way when it comes to our Creator. We love God, why? Because he first loved us. I would hold to this truth, that it is only true sons of God who know the meaning of love. There's so much in this world that parades itself as love, and it's not love. It's selfish, self-serving. It's lesser than. I don't think you can have a secular mind or heart and have any concept of love. I think you can say the words love. And so what we're going to explore here is not simply this phileo. Phileo is a fancy word to say brotherly love. This is where we get the city, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. Phileo love is a type of love. But what we're really trying to understand is the love between father and son, which we will see play out in the next 4 chapters. And so, again, I want to invite you into this, these lessons with an open mind and heart to really, truly look for the breadcrumbs that Mary Shelley's going to leave us. We're going to learn a little bit about Victor's life and his childhood and his upbringing. We're going to make note. I really want you to make note of his relationship with his father. It's going to be a significant relationship we don't want to miss. And then I want you to again note how are there similarities between Walton and Victor. Because again, here, Victor is, the whole point of his recounting the story is to try to get Walton to not go down the path that he's going down, but to take a different direction. Why? Because he walked down a very long road of unhealthy experience. And he's come to the end of his days recounting a tale that must be told. And so we want to look at this, the rest of this book in sorts, or this part of the book in sorts, as a dying man's desire to warn you of impending doom. And the first and primary thing that he's going to talk about is when you exalt knowledge above things, it is a danger that ends in destruction. And that is where we will end it. Any thoughts or questions?